Welcome back for level 2 of the Creepypasta Iceberg. These are still relatively mainstream, so most will more than likely be familiar with them. The first we will cover is called Candle Cove, a fictional children's television show that appeared in a forum called Net Nostalgia Forums. Posters would recount how they used to watch this show on Channel 58 while growing up, and would share memories of what they saw firsthand. This creepypasta became so popular that the Sci-Fi Channel adapted it into an entire season of a new series in 2015, Channel Zero. No End House is another creepypasta that was adapted into part of the Channel Zero series on Sci-Fi. The initial creepypasta was written by a blogger named Brian Russell and posted to 4chan in 2010 with a follow-up coming in 2012. The story centers around a man who takes on a challenge of going through 9 rooms of a haunted house in hopes of winning $500 to feed his drug habit. As he progresses through each room, the horrors he faces become more extreme and even more terrifying. Though he completes the challenge and receives the promised money, he is forever scarred. The Expressionless is a short story recounting how a female patient arrived at Sinai Hospital in June 1972 with a dead cat in her mouth. Once cleaned up and treated, the woman went from completely calm to attacking and killing the staff with inhumanely sharp teeth. The name is derived from the name given to the woman by a female doctor who survived the attack and was told by said patient that they were God. The Puppeteer is another creepypasta akin to Slender Man and Jeff the Killer, and describes, as well as being named after, a serial killer who turns his victims into puppets or toys. The Puppeteer was born as a man named Jonathan Black who falls in love with a girl named Emra he meets in high school theater class. Though the relationship seemed perfect, Emra left him behind once high school ended, sending him into a deep depression that resulted in him taking his own life via hanging. Nes Godzilla is a 9-part long creepypasta based off the Nintendo Entertainment System game Godzilla. The original version was posted by user CosbyDaff on the Bogleech forums and is pretty popular, though most, as long as it is, do not retain the creep factor everyone looks for in a good creepypasta. Like many others of its ilk, it recounts a person's playthrough of a game and the weird glitches they experienced. If you'd like me to cover this in more detail at some point, please let me know in the comments section below. The strangest security tape I've ever seen is a pretty interesting read. It takes the form of blog posts where an unnamed person in rural Pennsylvania describes their experiences at work with a new coworker named Jeremy. They talk about some weird occurrences seen on security camera where customers appear on a time loop, along with the unexplainable disappearance of motor oil and Jeremy suddenly popping up to grin through the camera at him. As the narrator progressively becomes more aware of the situation, they become more paranoid. Inevitably, they are caught in the time loop again, and the narrator ends up stating the same details from the beginning of the story. Abandoned by Disney is a creepypasta that describes a fully built resort in South Carolina that was completely abandoned for an unknown reason. The resort was called Mowgli's Palace and took on the feel of the movie The Jungle Book, the narrator explaining how much research they had done into this particular location. They eventually traveled to said location and trespassed onto the property, describing how the abandoned park looked as they went deeper into it. They reach the palace at the middle of the park to find Abandoned by Disney painted in big, black letters on the front door of the place, a sign of the disturbing things to come. The kitchen was the first place the narrator went to and begins hearing voices muddled by running water through the building. After running into a giant snake on the way out and realizing there was a snake enclosure on the premises, the narrator returns to the palace to find a set of stairs leading to the mascot's only room. They entered the untouched room after breaking the padlock to find it left in a state described as post-apocalypse movie state of evacuation, with everything still relatively intact, if only a little squishy from water damage. Another room labeled Character Prep 1 was found, and the narrator entered to find unsettling costumes with a human skull in one of them, taking a picture of it only to awaken a photo-negative version of the Mickey Mouse costume. The camera the narrator brought with him died as the costume got closer, and whatever spirit was in it whispered to them, "Hey, wanna see my head come off?" before clawing its own head off with chunky yellow blood spilling out everywhere. As they ran, the narrator looks up to see a metal sign with claw marks reading "Abandoned by God" above the room. The Tails doll curse is an urban legend of sorts based upon a multi-tailed fox that is a secondary character from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise called Tails. The story basically is of a video game called Sonic R that, if played, will summon a demonic Tails doll to kill the player. The Smiling Man is a short but unsettling story about someone going out for a late night walk only to see a man in the distance dancing towards them. As the man got closer, it was seen that he had a crazed look on his face with wide eyes and a Joker-style smile. After some weird shenanigans from the assumedly crazy stranger, the person is chased down until he was able to lose the man. Suicidemouse.avi talks about an unreleased 1930s Mickey Mouse cartoon that initially was only known to be a loop of the infamous Disney mascot walking past 6 buildings with a depressed expression to jarring piano music. More information eventually surfaced, and the short turned out to be much more than the initial description, each minute after the originally believed 3-minute runtime more disturbing than the last. The video becomes more distorted and disturbing, showing a hellish version of the world and of Mickey as the short continues on. It's said that any employees trying to copy it would be terminated, and that the clip is floating around on the internet under the name of the Creepypasta. Jason the Toymaker is an original story and character created by Chrysantil that was initially a human named Jason Meyer. Jason eventually becomes this magical, fiendish character whose sole purpose is to convince girls he calls the Chosen to play with him for all eternity. He uses 3 toys as his minions to carry out his mission: a wind-up mouse named Licorice that spies on potential victims, a second wind-up mouse named Red Mouse that explodes upon minimal touch, and a stuffed snake named Mr. Glutton that eats old wax dolls when they're too old to play with. The appearance of these toys and of the Toymaker himself change when he becomes angry, and any chosen one who comes to his disliking becomes a wax doll. The Midnight Game is based upon an old pagan ritual and was initially used to punish those who broke pagan religious laws, and as a scare tactic to not disobey the gods. It goes as follows. It must be exactly 12 a.m. when you begin performing the ritual, otherwise it will not work. You will need a candle, a piece of paper, a writing implement, matches or a lighter, salt, a wooden door, and at least 1 drop of your own blood. If you are playing with multiple people, they will need their own of the aforementioned materials, and they will have to perform the steps below accordingly. Write your full name first, middle, and last on the piece of paper. Put at least 1 drop of blood on the paper and allow it to soak into the paper. Turn off all of the lights in the place you are doing this. Go to your wooden door and place the paper with your name in front of the door. Now take out the candle and light it. Place it on top of the paper. Knock on the door 22 times. The hour must be 12 a.m. upon the final knock. Then, open the door, blow out the candle, and close the door. You have just allowed the Midnight Man to enter your house. Immediately relight your candle. This is where the game begins. You must now lurk around your now completely dark house, with the lit candle in your hand. Your goal is to avoid the Midnight Man at all costs until 3:33 a.m. Should your candle ever go out, that means the Midnight Man is near you. You must relight your candle in the next 10 seconds. If you are not successful in of doing this, you must then immediately surround yourself with the circle of salt. If you are unsuccessful in both of your actions, the Midnight Man will create a hallucination of your greatest fear and rip out your organs one by one. You will feel it, but you will be unable to react. If you are successful in creating the circle of salt, you must remain in there until 3:33 a.m. If you are successful in relighting your candle, you may proceed with the game. You must continue to 3:33 a.m. without being attacked by the Midnight Man or being trapped inside a circle of salt to win the Midnight game. The Midnight Man will leave your house at 3:33 a.m. and you will be safe to proceed with your morning. Indications that you are near the Midnight Man will include sudden drop in temperature, seeing a pure black humanoid figure through the darkness, and hearing very soft whispering coming from an indiscernible source. If you experience any of these, it is advised that you leave the area to avoid the Midnight Man. Do not turn any of the lights on during the midnight game. Do not use a flashlight during the midnight game. Do not go to sleep during the midnight game. Do not attempt to use another person's blood on your name. Do not use a lighter as a substitute for the candle. It will not work. And definitely do not attempt to provoke the Midnight Man in any way. Even when the game is over, he will always be watching you. Good luck. You're gonna need it. Pen Pal is another extremely long creepypasta that was posted to r/nosleep by Reddit user 1000 Vultures. The entire story broken up into 6 stories in total. Footsteps, balloons, boxes, maps, screens, and friends. The story started when the narrator meets a boy named Josh in kindergarten, and the class conducts a Pen Pal experiment where they tie self-addressed letters to balloons and send them off to see if they get a response. Instead of getting a letter back like most children did, the narrator instead got an envelope of Polaroid photos of himself and his mother. A string of strange events begins to happen over the narrator's early life, such as receiving the same dollar bill from a local snow cone seller that was placed in the Pen Pal letter, hearing clicking sounds of someone taking pictures while out rafting with Josh, and finding strange drawings being placed in a pair of shorts left on the riverbank depicting himself with a larger man. The story gets even more disturbing over time, and I would be happy to cover this in a separate video or stream because it is a very interesting creepypasta I had not heard of before. This set of stories did get turned into a novel of the same name. Nobody Saw It Coming is a creepypasta created by Dark Ivy Rose that describes the abduction of a boy named Nathan and his sister, Crystal. After those that abducted them throw him in a cell only to escape to find his sister dead, Nathan has a psychotic break and starts hearing her voice in his head. He murders everyone in the house they were held captive in and devotes his life to ending the existence of anyone he believes was involved in their abduction, having blocked out the fact that his sister was dead and believing that if those who did it paid, she would return to him. Bloody Painter is another creepypasta about a serial killer named Helen Otis, who is suspected of 3 specific cases of murder. It is important to note that, per the prequel story, his psyche was broken due to his parents raising him as a girl until the age of 6 before forcing him to dress as a boy when he started attending school. The first is the suspicious death of a classmate who fell from the school building, with Otis being named the culprit by another classmate. He later the same year went on a killing spree, killing 17 and injuring 5. Otis was placed in a psychiatric hospital for almost 10 years before he was released, only for police to find 5 corpses in his old home less than a year afterwards. The Rake is a cryptid-centered creepypasta that describes the appearance of a humanoid creature that appeared in the state of New York in 2003. The Rake is described as an emaciated naked man or hairless dog with big eyes and a shrill voice. This incident then generates a project in early 2016 where 24 documents from the 12th century to present day and spanning 4 continents were put together talking about the different eyewitness accounts of this creature. Gateway of the Mind is a creepypasta that is more or less a shorter version of the Russian sleep experiment, where a group of scientists try to see what happens when they deprive subjects of all sensory stimuli to see if it would reach God. After days of sensory deprivation, the subjects go mad and start killing those experimenting upon them. When the subject gets to the point of trying to kill themselves, they are restrained and tell the scientists, "I have spoken with God and he has abandoned us," before immediately dying. The Dollmaker is a very strange tale of revenge that begins with a professional dollmaker refusing to make a doll for a rich businessman who had bad intentions for the product. Their home is set ablaze and the dollmaker dies, saving his son. The businessman finds and abducts the son and treats him as a doll for 3 years before the son has enough and stabs him in the carotid artery with a pen. The son ran away and started to try making dolls as his father had, but he'd already lost his mind and started murdering people to make them perfect. Perfect little dolls. Entity 303 is a Minecraft creepypasta very similar to Herobrine, where a fired Mojang employee or a team of hackers show up in other people's games and corrupt their files. It is believed that Herobrine was made to warn players of what these people would do to ruin the game and cause it to be discontinued. Polybius is an urban legend about a rare arcade game released by a German company named Sense Deletion in 1981. The game was extremely popular because of weird things that would happen during gameplay, such as women crying or grotesque faces appearing at the corner of the player's eye. Some would have such adverse reactions they would have blackouts or amnesia, stop playing video games altogether, and even commit suicide. Men in Black would apparently appear to take records of the game before the cabinet disappeared altogether 1 month after it appeared in the arcade. Mario is, from what I could find, the first ROM hack pasta ever made and was posted by a user going by Adam on SMW Central. The hack pasta is a warped version of Super Mario World where the main character, Mario, is depicted as a psychotic man hellbound on destruction instead of a heroic plumber saving his princess. Throughout the playthrough of the game, there are a multitude of glitches and text blurbs that show just how reviled Mario is by those in the kingdom. After the game is completed, it depicts Mario jumping to his death, presumably from the deep-seated guilt over what he has done to his many victims. Since this ROM is still available for download, I would love to eventually play this on stream for you all, just so we can experience it together. Funnymouth is the name of an anonymous entity in 2 creepypastas depicting the weird conversations between an almost unintelligible forum user and other users from the same forum. Anyone who conversed with Funnymouth would start having graphic nightmares and slowly start losing their sanity. One user went from dreaming about worms in their neck and mouth that eventually turned to their own fingers after a psychotic break, effectively breaking their own jaw. When they woke and looked at themselves in the mirror, they started to call themselves Funnymouth and take on the same characteristics of the other user that had caused them to go into such a state. What a handsome face. What a funny mouth. A funny mouth. A funny mouth, funny mouth, funny mouth. Clockwork, Your Time Is Up is another creepypasta where the main protagonist experiences unspeakable things and becomes a violent serial killer thereafter. The character was initially named Natalie and came from a broken family where she was constantly abused by everyone, physically, sexually, and verbally. When she confides in another classmate, they tell her secret to everyone and causes harassment at school, while the art she creates to funnel her pain causes her to lose her boyfriend. She eventually snaps and starts to self-harm, sewing a smile on her face, and eventually undergoes some sort of surgery that's supposed to help her get better. The surgery goes horribly wrong, she regains consciousness, and goes on to murder the doctors involved before returning home to kill her entire family. Natalie then names herself Clockwork and claims that only she can determine when time is up for her victims. Fallout 3 Number Station is a myth regarding the video game Fallout 3, where a particular radio station in the game supposedly predicts future events. The myth states that if you go to certain areas on the map, a weird station will appear and provide multiple messages in Morse code that have been translated to world event predictions. Some have come true, some have not, but none have been corroborated even with the multitude of videos covering the topic. B.O.B. or Brutally Obscene Beast is a creepypasta posted to 4chan that is very similar to the Rake because it centers around a light-skinned and naked humanoid creature. In the story, the creature broke into a kid named Andrew's home by busting the glass patio doors and is confronted by the boy when he tries to attack it with a titanium baseball bat. After attacking the creature, it kills Andrew and devours the boy's remains. Mr. Widemouth is another popular creepypasta where a young, very ill boy recounts his interactions with a Furby-like creature when he was getting through his illness at a home he used to live in. He recounts multiple times when Mr. Widemouth tries to convince him to do increasingly dangerous things like juggling knives, painting them in the guise of some sort of game. The creature eventually tries to get the narrator to jump out the second-story window of his bedroom in the middle of the night with the promise that there would be a trampoline to catch his fall, and disappears when he refuses. The narrator moves not long after this interaction and returns as an adult to find a cemetery with many tombstones for children at the end of the trail behind the now burned-down house. Zalgo is the name of a meme character that originated in spoof newspaper comics on a semi-secret page of the official site of its creator, Something Awful user Dave Kelly, aka Schmorky. Zalgo is described as a creature of the utmost terror and is known as He Who Waits Behind the Wall and the Nesperdian Hive Mind, an eyeless demon with 7 mouths and is stained in the blood of a being called Amdagar. This creature can only affect comics, cartoons, and illustrations, but not itself, unless it is deceiving us all. JVK1166Z.esp is a video game creepypasta that takes the form of a modification for the game Elder Scrolls Morrowind that caused, like most other creepypastas of its ilk, weird events to occur in-game. The player notices small changes, such as odd messages popping up that were initially in the game, non-player characters wearing different armor with creepy movements, a new dungeon called the Citadel with overpowered creatures, and the sky in-game being replaced with what seemed to be the real night sky coupled with movement. The game consumes a user's life so much that they have vivid nightmares of being inside the game. Username 666 is an infamous YouTube video posted by creator Nana825763 that shows what happens when you search 666 on the content platform. After searching the number and refreshing the page a number of times, visual changes start to show up and take place, such as video tags becoming X666, the page becoming a blood red color, swirling graphics appearing, and disgusting videos of what seems to be human entrails appearing on the screen. It is said that if one does this, the cycle will never end and you will not be able to get away from this version of the YouTube website. Mariana Mordregard Glesgorov is another well-known YouTube video creepypasta and has apparently been taken off the internet completely, with the only remnants being the first 20 seconds of the original video. The complete video is apparently 2 minutes long and depicts a man staring at you and slowly becoming more distorted over time. The supposed reason for the full video being removed is due to 153 people gouging their eyes out during or after viewing it and sending them to YouTube's main office in San Bruno. So far, we've just scratched the surface levels of the creepypasta Iceberg, and the final 3 levels should continue to be more bizarre and gruesome as we go further down, so stay tuned. I wanted to take the time to thank my Patreons Mike and Debi. Your support of the channel is greatly appreciated. If you like my content and would like to support the channel, there is a link in the description below. All Patreons receive access to content 24 hours prior to it being posted on the channel, along with requesting a video topic and, at the highest level, being able to co-host a show with myself. If you are interested, the link is once again in the description below.